to welcome everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today on our NeurodiverseIT webinar, Starting a Neurodiversity ERG, which is an employee resource group for those. Hopefully that was that's not too much news to everyone here. Otherwise, you might be in the wrong place. But yeah. So what we are this topic came about as a result of discussions within the committee and with some other people who were as an effective way of supporting a genuinely neurodiverse workforce and neurodivergent people within the workforce. So we wanted to share our experiences, and we've got a panel of 4 experts or people of significant experience in this area who've got various levels of knowledge and practical experience of starting and working with ERGs in their own organizations. And you have me as well. So I'd like to say welcome and thank you very much to our panel. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Matthew Bollinger. I'm chair of NeurodiverseIT. I'm a neurodiversity and innovation specialist by practice, and that's basically me. I work with, my interest in this particular thing is I work with organizations sometimes around setting up and developing ERGs and with the people doing so in their organizations. So I would like to invite our panelists who are all nicely in the top row of my screen to introduce perhaps yourselves. What I might do is I think I can, in Zoom, I can pin you all for all participants. So I'm going to do, can I allow, I think I'm going to try and pin the 5 of us. But in the meantime, could you perhaps please introduce yourselves? And whoever would like to go first, come off mute and start.
I don't mind. Okay, so hi, I'm Beckett. I currently work as head of compliance at Five Rights, but my reason for being on this panel today is in my previous job, I founded the Neurodiversity ERG for a quite large national engineering consultancy. For those of you who benefit from audio descriptions, I'm a white guy with quite overgrown brown hair at this point, teal t-shirt and big silver pilot glasses, and I'm really happy to be here.
Super, thank you, Beckett. Who would like to go next?
Yeah. So Karthik Raghuraman here. I go by RK, based out of New Jersey, USA. I have worked for multiple Fortune 500, both as well as a consultant, learning consultant. I develop global learning modules, which will be launched organization-wide for large pharmaceutical companies and technology companies, where diversity and inclusion is one of the main topic which needs to be considered, just so that it's reaching to all the employees and the contractors that they work for that particular organization. I'm happy to be here, and I'll share whatever experience I had as being part of the ERG groups that I have been with multiple different organizations.
Thank you.
I'm Laura Harris. I am a CRM technology manager for Pepper Money. We are a mortgage provider, if no one's ever heard of us. And I set up, along with a colleague, a neurodivergent ERG last year. We've just celebrated our 1-year anniversary. It's been amazing. And we really do feel like we're starting to make a difference in our organisation.
Thank you, Laura.
Super. Hello, I'm Aurora Pakenham-Smith. I'm Director of Site Reliability Engineering at Kevel. It's about a company of about 150 people, so I'm a little bit smaller than some of these the other panelists. But a lot of my experience comes recently in starting ERGs in general at that company, as well as specifically a neurodiversity ERG and sort of the journey it took to get there.
Lovely. Thank you very much, everyone. So to start with, I'd like to start with what is hopefully a fairly easy question, which is, what is an ERG? So just so we're all on the same page, what do we mean by an ERG?
I'm just to take this one. It's a group of employees who have some kind of defining factor about them that joins their experience in some ways, and a group for them to meet and have their issues and their values and all of the kinds of things heard by the leadership of that organization, with the view to improving the experience of organizations for those people. It's not limited to, say, neurodivergence. Quite popularly, there are women's ERGs or ones around disability, race, and various other things.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other aspects that they've they'd like to add to that?
Go ahead.
Sorry. One of the things that I would like to say is it's not just for people of that description, it is for everyone. So we have an LGBTQ group, and it's not just people who are LGBTQ, it's anyone who identifies as an ally. And the same with the neurodivergent group. We have chosen that anyone can join, whether they are or aren't.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the main things that stands out to me is it's definitely a place for people to be a collective, but also it's not just always about being very loud and vocal and asking for things. Sometimes it's about having just a community of similar or like-minded people that you can feel open talking about parts of your identity with, especially for people who have parts of their identity that are maybe more stigmatized, work topics at large.
Thank you. So I think, shall we move on to maybe like the beginning stage? As this talk is very much about how we start an ERG. So I think the first stage is perhaps how do we start making the case for an ERG internally? What are your experiences of having made the case to establish it in the first place?
So one problem we have encountered is, like I said, the organization is large and there are already multiple ERG groups for different reasons. And I know when we go ask for neurodiverse ERG group, and why there is a need, right? If there is something that can be part of like a subgroup, for example, can it come under disability group? But the need is really different, right? So we cannot put that in a big bucket. It can be in a big bucket, but the specific need for neurodiverse people are really different, right? So what make that work for us is like when you go back with the data, with the factual information, and having real people back that up. And if you have the right sponsor as well, who can actually come from the leadership team, then it'll work like a piece of cake, right? So, but it's not easy. It's easy to say it, but when it doesn't come to practical, it's support from both end, right? From the people who are actually suffering and looking for help, and the people who can actually support the cause with the real factual data, right? What really helped us to also pull in information from the external resources where we can see how other companies have introduced this and what are the benefits that they have. And sometimes we see that this neurodiversity as a weakness, but if we change the story and see how it is strong, and if we can make a case and see how other companies have used these people to actually improve the productivity or innovation, then make the case accordingly, right? That will actually sell well, because for business, at the end of the day, whatever we do, they are looking at what is the return on investment on this, right? If you can actually make a case, that has help.
I really like that, and that point that there is a business case to this, I think, is really important. It's not just a thing because it's the right thing to do, or because we want to be, but there's actually a solid business case to be made behind this, I think is really helpful. So thank you, Karthik. Yeah.
The way we came to it was there was a need for the LGBTQ ERG. And once that was launched, the company said, right, well, we've found this one need, surely there might be other needs. So they created a list of possible ERGs, and they sent a poll round to the whole company and said, which one do you want next? And the ND one was the top of the pick. So it was an identification of a need, because so many people said, this is the one we need. It was yeah, it was a great way to do it, because you didn't have to look for volunteers, because you'd already had so many people going, yes, let's do this.
Absolutely.
I think in my perspective, there were other ERGs already at the organization I was at. And I'd maybe put my head above the parapet and said, oh, maybe we could have a neurodiversity one. And then a bunch of other people said, I'm so glad someone's recommended that, because I didn't want to be the person to do it. But yeah, I was happy to take that forward. And I think maybe I'm preaching to the choir here, as it's a BCS event, but there is a sort of stereotypal trend that a lot of neurodivergent people are in STEM careers. So I think a business, or this is a very large group of people with very specific needs that we maybe don't know how to address when they're all separated out and dispersed. Whereas if we can get them together, maybe they can have a stronger voice, and maybe they can benefit from being connected to each other outside of just how are they supported at work.
Yeah, in our case, there had been sort of an informal ERG for a while. There was a women's group that had kind of sort of stumbled to a halt. Hadn't kept going, and in general, the DEI initiatives at the company were sort of limping along and barely alive. So one of the really key things there was to get leadership buy-in. And having buy-in from the head of HR, for example, was really key on this. He was really keen to kind of get more stuff going. And then taking that existing women's group and saying, can this be the first ERG for our company? It's already got a broad group of members. How do we go from there? So laying down the definitions for what it meant to be an ERG for us and setting those expectations made leadership more confident that this would have some value, and that there would be a change, and we wouldn't suffer the same issues we did the previous time. We wanted to make sure there was a cadence, there was a group that was meeting, that they were able to talk to leadership if that's something they wanted to do. And that's ultimately what ended up happening. That group is now quite successful, and out of that we were able to spawn a neurodiversity group, and there's one other, and I've forgotten what it is, which is really poorly behaved. I think it might be parents.
Oh, so yeah, so I really like that. I think that that finding other groups, similar groups, it's often the case that neurodiversity isn't the first group. So that you can draw from that. I just noticed a comment in the chat is that at one company we may need a neurotypical ERG. I mean, I think for those of us working in STEM organizations, I could definitely resonate with that myself. So yes. Brilliant. So, Karthik, during your talk, you mentioned executive sponsorship and representation at senior level. Is that something you or someone else would be happy to talk to a little bit more? How did you go about finding that?
I did not do it myself, Matt, but I know how it happened. So it's not always the case that what I have seen is, when people are interested, it's because it's either them or somebody close by within the family or next family, immediate family. They have something, right? That's when they know that the real impact of how this group will actually support. Fortunately, we had that leader who was sponsored. The COO was having a close relationship who had that kind of a dyslexia. So she kind of understood what we are doing and why we are doing. So that actually made our case easier in one of the cases. But I don't know. I'm looking for others to see how they have actually done it.
No, I really like that. I think finding someone with lived experience is going to save you a lot of explaining. Yeah.
And she also did a story of that, right? So that actually made a case, and we recorded a video where we shared that with the global group of everyone. So when we launched this, she actually shared that experience also, right? So we captured that. So it's coming from leadership, but also sharing her own experience, make it authentic, right? And sometimes it's the trust, right? So it's not just, as we discussed before, it's not for the sake of doing it. why we are doing it. And when it comes from leadership and they have shared their own experience, that actually makes the case better for more people, to not just people who are actually suffering or who has immediate family, but other people's, right? So most of the like 40% of volunteers are outside, right? But that can happen only if they know that this group exists and there is a leadership support is available for them, right? And there should be some kind of incentive as well, right, for other volunteers because they're doing it out of their extra time that they're putting it for other groups, right? So if there is a linking or something to the performance reviews or something, if they are contributing something to this ERG groups, that's another nice way where we can actually include more volunteers into the group.
Yeah, I really like that, making sure that it's reflected structurally and rewarded, or at least not punished as extra work. And I think also it signals to people, like Beckett, you mentioned, that there's a risk to doing this to some degree. There is stigma around these conditions, and it signals to people that it is safe to engage, that leadership have got behind it, and it's something that they're supporting. And that's an encouraging thing for people who in previous organizations might have not had that experience. Does anyone else have any suggestions around executive sponsorship or leadership support?
It's the one thing we have really struggled with, is because it was something that the populace wanted, we didn't have buy-in from the top from the beginning. And we still don't. So what we do is we lean on the DE&I committee, because DE&I is, it's part of the core foundation of most companies these days. And because we lean on them and they have the exec buy-in, that's how we kind of get sort of sideways buy-in. So a lot of the things we do is that they're sort of teamed up with the DE&I committee. We also borrow their budget.
I guess that's another big area, is actually is understanding that it's going to take some budget. It's going to take some, and again, executive sponsorship is going to help with securing that and figuring out what budget has something available to support the work.
Yeah, I mean, the DE&I committee, the woman who runs it is lovely, and she's very vocal in the sort of London community about DE&I, and she has a lot of influence at our company. So that means that if she's like, we need the extra money for this, then we get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anyone else have any experiences or tips around this kind of executive sponsorship side of things?
I guess trying to make that case from the beginning, it's very important for two reasons. One is it's nice to have a group where you can all support each other and just talk about your relevant issues, but at the same time that's not going to go anywhere or do anything, and it risks being a bit performative if you don't have a so what at the end of it from the top. But also I think having that link to the top and being able to get those resources makes things go much more smoothly for both the board and for the ERG. There's no back and forth like, oh, can we just have this much money for this? Or are we allowed to put a post on about this on the intranet? And it's setting those trust lines and those responsibilities from the get-go is in everyone's best interest.
Absolutely. I suppose, but actually, before I go on, Aurora, did you have anything you wanted to add to this particular topic before I move on?
Not particularly on that. I mean, more that, if you have a relatively diverse leadership, it's a little bit easier, I think, in general, to find people who are more likely to be allies. But other than that, no real observations, I'm afraid.
Brilliant. No, that's absolutely fine. I was going to move on because I think Beckett, you're almost leading into it around like deciding on the purpose, and framing the thing, and therefore that, I guess that's the highest level of governance, is deciding why you're doing a thing, because everything under that is how you do a thing.
Pick up on something that Peter has said in the chat about middle management being important. And not to inflate my ego too much, but I'm in middle management, so it certainly helped that I was pushing for it and going for it on there. But I just want to highlight, Peter, yeah, I think you're absolutely correct on that.
Yeah, I would like to piggyback on that, Aurora. So to answer Peter's question, right, one thing we did differently is that there is group, obviously people we are supporting within the group, and we are doing mass communication, but at the end of the day, these people are reporting to the managers. If the manager don't understand how we can actually strengthen the existing strengths that the people have, right? If they don't have that kind of a knowledge, then it'll not backfire. One thing that we did differently is, we did the training for the managers, middle level managers, right? On, what is the real scenario? What is that going in the ground, right? How do you actually tackle them? But if you look at it from, take one step back, and if you look at it, what went through the training, it's all the basic thing which we have to do for anyone, no matter what. Just that if you put the neurodiversity lens, you'll actually go a little bit forward and do it for them, right? But it's going to help their team and the managers to perform better. So it's going to impact the entire team as well. We received a good positive feedback for that as well.
Yeah, I think David has shared a useful comment in the chat as well about, the clarity of purpose relates to what are the benefits for people at each level of the organization, and helping them understand that, and like why it matters to them in their role and with their responsibility. I think that's really, really helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
I think one of the most important things that we did in the early stages is setting out together, from those of us who we're going to be the first cohort, I guess, a document for our terms of reference. So what we are, why we're doing it, who we are, who we accept, which is everyone, or was everyone. The ERG still exists, but obviously I don't have visibility anymore. I think the next thing after you have that terms of reference is that it shows your commitment, and you're not just kind of having I suppose what some people call the water cooler conversation about maybe doing this thing. And that really helps get buy-in from the top, because you've shown that you've got buy-in from within already. And then suddenly, at least in my case, people tend to be a lot more open about conversations of board sponsors, training for ERG leadership, funding, that kind of stuff.
So moving towards something that's somewhat formal, so some has a reality to it, has a tangibility to it as quickly as possible, or fairly quickly. Yeah.
I think getting things down in writing is important, having a charter for the group, but also, crucially, I think having a process that they can follow to form as well. And that's not just, okay, turn up and write this document and you're done. It's, that charter includes the expectations as well, that you are going to meet at least as many times a year, and that once a year you'll review what you're doing, and this is how you can ask for money and things like that. But also when it comes to starting the group as well, here is the way to do it. Someone has a vested, or some people have a vested interest in this. They want to get it started. They need to go and find some members, some potential members. They need to get together with them and not only fill this charter out, but also start thinking about what they're going to talk about for the next few months. If any of you have ever done like Agile Coffee or a similar sort of unconference thing before, it's a pretty decent sort of format for doing that as well. Just getting a bunch of stuff, putting some votes on it, and you'll find very quickly that you've got an awful lot of stuff to talk about with all these people who are quite like you. And then going from there, and also sharing back to the wider community through all hands, newsletters, intranet posts, whatever you've got, is a really effective way of showing that the ERG is there and it's doing stuff as well, which I think being visible is incredibly important.
Thank you. Absolutely. No, I think there's a lot to unpack there. I'm going to come back to some of the things that you've mentioned there, I think, because there's a lot of areas there. But I think this visibility and being able to really go out there with a it's almost like a proposal, like an offer, isn't it? It's almost like this is what we mean by this, and being able to get clear amongst the people that are really, who are really starting with this, to give you a solid foundation to build from. So the next thing really then is how do you find people to both to be members, to be volunteers, to participate, or perhaps to be allies and supporters as well?
Well, as I said earlier, we did a poll, so we knew that there was general interest. When we initially decided to form, we posted on the intranet, we went around and around, and we got a really good cohort of members who were all, you know, oh, it's new and shiny. But what we discovered is that over time that waned, and actually we've had a lot of members leave the company, which is a whole other conversation. But what we've done subsequently is every time we do an initiative, you know, like Neurodivergent Celebration Week, we will do a number of posts about what we have done and what we have coming up, just to keep people's interest and try and boost the new the numbers. And I saw earlier in the chat someone said that a part of their company had an ERG, but it didn't extend to where they were. We recently opened an office in Manila, and all of the different interest groups that we had, whether it be well-being or D&I or you know, neurodivergence or all the different groups, had a chance to talk. We had a big meeting. The whole office from Manila sat down. They watched us all talk and discuss what our groups were about, who we were, and off the back of that, we've got new members from Manila. But it's a constant awareness campaign of, we're still here, this is what we're doing, this is what we've done, this is where we're going. And it's a constant churn of reminding people that we're there for them, to just keep the members coming, because at the end of the day, it's a side of desk project. It's not like someone's main role. So, you know, if you're interested, yeah, you can come along and just listen. But if you want to get involved more, you know, it does involve a little bit of work. So keeping the numbers up of people who are willing to do that little bit of work is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds a little bit like running a specialist group within BCS as well. And like one of the things I found is when you have a mostly neurodivergent volunteers, it's really important to make sure that you have a wide range of different skills and different abilities represented, so that people are free to play to their strengths and hopefully avoid having to do the stuff that they struggle with.
Yeah, within our group, I have a co-chair. She's ADHD, I'm dyslexic, so she does all the writing and I do all the talking.
Excellent.
Yeah, on my end, the recruitment sort of started before ERGs were even a conversation within the company. I did a presentation in front of the whole company about ADHD, my experience of it. And the biggest thing that came out of that was sharing that experience, caused a bunch of people to kind of come out of the woodwork and sort of talk to me and say, hey, I have this too, or I have, I'm autistic or dyslexic, and you know, I have similar issues affecting me. Or well, perhaps the one I should really have foreseen, but the slightly more surprising one, was a lot of parents coming out and saying, hey, my kid has ADHD. Could I talk to you about it sometime? And it was out of having that existing network that I knew that there was a demand, and that I could then go and talk to those people about it and kind of have some inbuilt first members.
Yeah, to bounce off that, I think sometimes what it really does take is just, at least in my experience as well as Aurora's, one person who is maybe comfortable saying, yeah, I am this, this is how my life works and how I navigate this problem, and then suddenly lots of other people who maybe really have valuable contributions to make but did not have that kind of perceived level of safety or confidence to be able to be the first one to say, hi, I'm here. It's like when there's a group that you can come to rather than you being the first, it can kind of snowball quite organically, depending on where you are, obviously.
Really true. Like having that level of safety, and I was in a place where, well, I still am in a place where I know most of the leadership team relatively well. So because it's a relatively small company, it's easier to do that. So I felt completely safe going ahead and talking about that in front of people. But a lot of people wouldn't have been. And I think it's important to try and find those champions and encourage them to do that as well. Obviously not forcing them to step out of their comfort zone. But if you can find people and give them a voice, I think that's a really important thing to do.
Yeah, one thing we've found is that a lot of people are like, I don't want to join the group, but I just want advice. And you kind of have to nurture those relationships because they're going through something, they're discovering who they are. They don't want to be seen to be either an ally or neurodivergent themselves yet. Both me and my co-chair are well-being first aiders, sort of mental health first aiders. So we're very lucky that we've got that as well. So when people come to us and they're like, you know, I'm going through this thing, we can talk to them both as neurodivergent people, both as parents of neurodivergent people and as well-being first aiders, to just, you know, help them on their journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think it's really important to think that there are, you know, it's not an either or. People aren't in or out. You know, there's a process for, you know, there are some people who are going to be pioneering, and then some people who are only going to join when they're a bit more comfortable, and for whatever reason. Yeah, absolutely. Has anyone else got anything to add on finding volunteers, finding allies before we move on?
I see there's a question in the chat about whether diagnosis is helpful, which I can kind of give a few words on. I think as someone who was diagnosed very late, I can definitely see the value in opening things up to everyone, and you know, not everyone has access to ease of diagnosis. If you're on the NHS, the waiting list is, I think, years longer at this point. I kind of see diagnosis as, in some ways, yes, it does cause people to treat you differently, but it's also a privilege that not everyone is afforded. So I would say that, you know, diagnosis should not be a barrier to you feeling like you want to engage in this kind of work, or if you want to start this kind of ERG at your own organization. I don't think you shouldn't feel like you have to wait. And, you know, things that benefit neurodivergent people also benefit everyone else a lot of the time. So if you can benefit other people, regardless of whether they're diagnosed or not, regardless of whether you're diagnosed or not, I'd say that's a net positive.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is going to be a question for any ERG to consider. And I completely agree with everything you've said. And I think I've known some groups that outside of this context that were very strict about diagnosis and access, but we have such long waiting lists, and it's so difficult to access diagnosis, and not even desirable for some people. I think it's probably going to be a more pragmatic and welcoming approach to make sure that to allow the valid self-identification and questioning as well.
Yeah, we had a long conversation when we were first starting about whether it should just be for people who are neurodivergent or who think they're neurodivergent, or whether we should allow allies as well. And ultimately, we felt that if you don't allow allies in, then you'll lose your allies, basically. Yeah, we thought it was better to let everyone see our world rather than have it closed and have people not understand.
I think there is one slight, not caveat to this, but one slight thing I've seen that I've noticed in similar spaces is that it's important to make sure that neurodivergent needs are met in the way that you structure the group as the priority. And I think that's the one difference, because we're so used to meeting neurotypical needs first. We're so used to spaces that do that, and ways of being and processes that do that. And instead, it's to meet neurodivergent needs first. And anyone else who wants to be in that space is welcome, but on the understanding that the space is kind of run by and for people who experience the world a particular way, and that even though they're used to their needs being met outside of that, we may or may not completely do that in this space. So I guess that kind of leads us on really to think about a bit more structural things, about the kind of practical approaches that people have taken. So things like structure, establishing a good cadence for different aspects of things, the kind of ceremonies, rituals, if you're into Agile, that you might want to adopt, the kind of targets or ways you might evaluate your approach. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Happy to kind of jump in. I think what can be helpful and what definitely worked for me, I'm not going to say it's the only way that works though, is having your targets be very close-knit internal to the group in the short term, and when you're first starting up, like have so many people be able to support so many people through this process. Just something like have a visible space for this topic, and then for your medium and long term, then you can start worrying about how that impacts everyone else outside of your community. So then once you're established, then you can start hosting an event in Neurodiversity Celebration Week. Then you can say, I want to put out this many posts on our intranet, I want to have this many socials or whatever. But I think it's quite easy when you first start to have all these amazing ideas and get quite carried away. But I think it's small and often at first, and then you will kind of have the structures fall into place for those grander things later.
Yeah, I 100% agree. We tried to do way too much when we first started. You know, we were like, oh, there's this day and there's this day, and let's do 3 things this month. But yeah, we learned pretty quickly that, you know, if we do something once every 2 months, that's fine. It doesn't need to be every week. We don't need to celebrate every flavor of neurodiversity. Just let's start with the basics and work our way up.
I think that's really key, right? So, I mean, as a person with ADHD, one thing I always think is that I fall back to the level of my systems. I can't rely on motivation to be there all the time. And I think groups, especially large groups of people, behave very similarly. So having some structure in place and some regularity, I think, is absolutely crucial. And as you said, Laura, it doesn't have to be that often. It doesn't have to be that much. It just has to be something. So meeting every 1 month, 2 months, quarter, something like that, enough to keep everyone in the group in regular enough contact that you're able to keep a conversation going over that length of time, that you're occasionally able to have people talk more about their experiences or talk about particular issues within the company that you would like to address or things that you'd like to put forward. Just having that regular point of contact. A lot of things will come out of just seeing each other on a regular cadence.
Yeah, we originally started with 2 meetings a month, but since I want to say June, we've chopped it down to 1 meeting a month. The reason why we had 2 was because to start with, we would have 1 business meeting a month and 1 sharing session a month, which worked really well to start with. But since our numbers have declined, there's not enough people to share every month. So we try and do a sharing session every quarter now. And so we don't need nearly as many meetings as we did. I mean, the sharing sessions are amazing. They're probably my favorite part of it. We get people who were diagnosed in the last year. We get people who were diagnosed as children. We've actually had 2 people share who are allies and just telling us their story, how they came to know about neurodivergence. And it's all very powerful. Some of them make you cry, some of them make you laugh. But it just demonstrates how safe everyone feels within the group. And it's really, really special. I mean, it is really, really powerful stuff. And I wouldn't swap doing this for the world.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it's one of the things to think in terms of business benefits, and that is one of the ways that we might sell it to the outside world. But the validation, the experience of just being with other people who share your lived experience when your lived experience is somewhat uncommon, is so healing. For aside from anything else, so helpful, so useful, and yeah, is a huge part of this. Thank you for sharing that, Laura. Any other suggestions on kind of bits of structure or how, like practical things that people could, that have you found particularly helpful, or perhaps things you've tried that weren't helpful at all? thought looked like they'd be good, but turned out not to be.
I think something that works well, and I just feel is very important, is cultivating this environment where you don't have to be the chair, you don't have to be on the committee. If you've got an idea, let's hear it and let's roll with it. I think some of the best things are just organic ideas that came out of a random conversation that you can have. Yes, of course, there's a lot of fun stuff you can do when you plan out in the calendar, but not everyone can think on the spot of what they want to put in the calendar right away. Yeah, I think making it clear that everyone is equal in the group. Yes, we have defined roles, and we'll have a treasurer, we'll have someone who has to relay to the board every quarter or whatever what we've been doing, but we're all in it for the same reason, and we should all have the same power to give and receive from it.
I think you also need to consider company culture as well when you're doing things. So, for example, our Cardiff office loves a good stand around with a cup of tea, have some donuts, discuss things, have a game, do whatever. Our London office does not do that. Our London office does not want, they don't want to get together. They don't want to stand together. They don't want to have a cup of coffee together. They want to sit at their desks and listen to something. So it's making sure that you're doing enough of each thing to keep each individual cultural experience. I mean, adding Manila into the mix has blown our minds because their culture is, again, completely different. So we're having to consider all these different cultural elements. So, for example, for our 1-year anniversary, we decided we were going to do, each office was going to get a puzzle. We found this great, it was a well-being puzzle. In Cardiff, they set it up. They had balloons, they had decorations, they had donuts and coffee and stuff. In London, we put it on the table with the donuts next to it and a little sign that said, come and put a piece into the puzzle. It was all to do with, we're all completely different, but together we fit together as a community. And London took 2 weeks to do the puzzle. Cardiff did it in 2 days. So, but then it also sparked this whole rivalry on the intranet about how, the Welsh are really good at things and the English aren't. But we had to consider how the different offices behave around the different things that we want to do.
You've just made me think of something else as well, which is don't feel you have to silo yourself. People are very diverse, all different walks of life, backgrounds, etc. There are usually more than other ERGs in an organization. You can work with them, and some of the best events that I have seen come out of ERGs are the ones where they work together. So, for example, if I've seen, not specifically related to neurodiversity, but I've seen really good crossover events, let's say. I'm making it sound like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but events that are a combination of spotlight, like on the LGBT plus community and on the Black and minority ethnicity community, and like how those things intersect. And you can learn some really fascinating things and also empower people within your organization in ways that they are maybe not necessarily empowered just in those individual silos. And I always think those are much more powerful than just saying diversity is a bunch of very disparate boxes that aren't connected, because that's never really true.
Thank you. I think, you know, to slightly start to think about bringing this together into something that people can take away as we're getting towards the end of the kind of panel discussion hour, and there's some really interesting questions and comments that I'd love to get back to in the discussion part in the once we're finished with this. But if we think in terms of like, what's the minimum steps we need to just get to that? It sounds like that first session, you know, that we talked about, and how, so what do you feel like, what are the bits that someone would need to do just to bring themselves to that, or to think about to get to that first thing and get up and running?
To me, find a business case, not just the need for it. But like Laura mentioned, if there is a survey or something that you can do. And one more thing I've seen is anonymity, right? When you do the survey, they don't want here, someone mentioned the comment, right? Not everyone is willing to show them that, you know, they have this disability. You know, they don't know how it might be received in the organization, whether it is right or wrong. So, you know, do that, business case and identify the right sponsor who can actually support, and see if you can actually make the sponsor as your, front face, make it a visible role, so that, you know, you'll be able to, make the sponsor speak at the launch event or something, so that, the trust comes from the top leaderships and the people will actually listen to, and they'll feel the trust to join in this groups, even if we open up, right? And I've also seen differences, like Laura mentioned, right, in other groups. She said within the country, but I've seen from different countries, right? So some countries are like more open to discuss, and some countries are not that open, right? So they wanted to just be part of it, but silently. So considering all that, create a business case, identify the right sponsor, and use the sponsor to actually, push forward and launch the event.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think we've mentioned quite a lot of things, and actually you don't need to get completely there. You don't need to have a completely nailed down charter and like a completely worked plan to be able to get to that first event. You can be more iterative, and as long as you've got that, you essentially got a bit of buy-in, you can you can start, and that's more important than getting everything really neatly in place. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think if you're sat on this call right now thinking, I wish my job had a neurodiversity ERG or one for a different group, then the most fundamental thing is you might be the right person to start this. You know, I think it's building a business case is hard, especially when there is no existing structure to go off. It's something you'll eventually need to do, but you can start, as David says in the chat, start from where you are. And you can start finding other people in your organization who feel the same way as you do. And it's sort of up to your comfort level as to how you go about finding those people. But those people are there. And they really want to talk about it too.
Thank you. I love that. And I think it's important to remember you might be pushing on a relatively open door. My experience with setting up NeurodiverseIT as well was that I realized there was a gap in BCS. I said, look, there are a lot of neurodivergent people in tech. We want to support, these are the issues that I knew about already, so it wasn't a detailed and specific business case. It was just this is probably a good idea kind of business case. And the answer was just yes, basically. there was a couple of forms to fill in and a couple of bit of process. And it happened that simultaneously and unknown to me, someone else had also said exactly the same thing. And we ended up setting everything up together. So I think it's, if you, I love what you said there, Aurora, about, if you see this need, then start asking for it, advocating for it to the level that feels good to you and to what feels good to you. Thank you. Yeah. Anything else on like what it takes to get started, what you'd need to do to get started?
I think there's kind of 3 core ingredients, I guess, that I would say are the minimum. One is have at least something written down, just to have people to hold you accountable to that. It doesn't have to be a full charter or a whole plan or a whole entire super detailed business case. Just have something that demonstrates your commitment and what you want from other people. 2, I would say, try and get that link to the board as soon as you can, because that's going to, again, stop you from falling into this trap of doing all these meetings, putting all this effort in and not getting the results out that you want. And then 3rd, just have passion. And I think, if you're at that point already, you probably already got the passion that you need. But yeah, it is an important ingredient.
Maybe allow yourself to display that passion is probably a more,
don't feel self-conscious about it, because otherwise everyone just feels like they don't want to be the one to start it.
Okay. To wrap up, does anyone have any particular resources or anything that they found particularly useful, or they found since, that they think it would be helpful to share with anything that jumps out at you, or sources of information that you could let people know about?
One of the ones that I use and direct people to is a company called Lexic. They do loads of free webinars. A lot of it is around recruitment. So you kind of have to pick and choose which webinars you do. But for example, they've got one coming up about whether your company is compliant with the Disability Act as far as neurodivergence is concerned. We get so much of our information from their webinars. They're absolutely brilliant. They also do other things that you can pay for, but I love the free webinars.
+1 to Lexic, 100%. They are a great source of information. A couple more. I'm going to betray my local area a bit. We have a neurodiversity show, and that sometimes is a conference that happens in different parts of the UK, and I suspect there are very similar conferences where everyone is based. I found that's just really great to see how other people are doing their ERGs, and to find out about resources that can possibly help people in your organisation. So last time I went to one, I had a mission to try and find specific workplace adjustment aids that would help people with dyslexia, and I came away with like a long list, and it was amazing. Another one that my organization at the time sent me to is a training company called Radius, and they have a course on how to run an ERG and how to set up an ERG, which kind of fits the bill really well for what we're talking about, and I found that really valuable.
Another good place to look for resources, also free, is we've just joined Neurodiversity in Business, and they have a suite of resources, and it's just vast. So we're working specifically on reasonable adjustments at the moment, and we're putting together business cases for a change in the way we do it. And the resources they have on there are just so helpful for getting anything done. So if you did want to set up an ERG, just looking at their resources will help create your business case for you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add before we wrap up this section of the talk and move to the discussion?
Can I answer a question that's in the chat?
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll do the answers in a. I mean, that'll be where I'm starting with the discussion, honestly. But does it fit into the overall? I mean, or
we can look at it in a minute.
Yeah, we'll take it in. Yeah. So super. So yes. So thank you everyone thank you all to the panel for your really interesting answers and to everyone for the comments, and we'll move on to a discussion. I'm going to close the recorded part of this talk, so I'm just going to do that bit now. If you are a member of NeurodiverseIT, thank you very much for coming along. If you aren't a BCS member or aren't a member of the NeurodiverseIT specialist group, please consider joining if you found this useful and you'd find BCS useful as a group. We do relatively regular events. They're becoming more regular, but we're still working out exactly our own cadence around this kind of thing and how we manage this. So it's really helpful to give us feedback about what has been useful and what hasn't. And you can find all the details on the link that Beckett has really helpfully shared in the chat. If you search Google for BCS NeurodiverseIT, you'll also quite likely to find us. So yes, thank you all very much.